Welcome to this really important episode of Evidence of Greatness. This month, we're going to be looking at a really cool study. And the title of the article is The Relationship Between Therapist and Client Hope with Therapy Outcomes. And as you can see here, you can see the various authors. But this study isn't specific to solution-focused brief therapy, but it does have some really important significance for solution-focused brief therapists. So let's get started. One of the things that's important to talk about is that this study was built on Snyder's hope theory, state hope theory, which I've talked about in other episodes of Evidence of Greatness. And one of the things that I kind of think about when I think about the theoretical conceptualization of solution-focused brief therapy. So that in some sense, this really is a study that aligns closely. But one of the things that's important kind of from this literature review is that the authors talk about how many scholars have espoused that clients' hope in their lives and the therapist's ability to instill hope are fundamental common factors that contribute to change occurring. So we all know from the common factors literature, but we also know kind of from our own anecdotal experiences that when clients feel hopeful, something happens, change is more likely to occur. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go, but they also cited this article, Frank and Frank from 1991, where they said that therapy achieves its effect by directly treating demoralization, while overt pathological symptoms are treated indirectly. And so what this means, this is kind of a fundamental shift in thinking, that instead of just addressing symptoms and fixing symptoms, problem solving them, in essence, what makes therapy work, according to Frank and Frank, is that it treats the lack of hope, demoralization, hopelessness. And so they talk about how when clients feel hopeful, when hope is instilled, change is likely to occur. And you can kind of hear a common theme here. They go on to talk about how the role of hope in the client's lives is arguably paramount to their well-being and their ability to work effectively in therapy. So again, you can hear this like notch in all of the literature that's saying clients' hopefulness really is at the crux of effective therapy. And then finally, they quote Lazarus from 1999, who says, contending that hope involves a condition or assumption that one's present life circumstances is unsatisfactory, presumably because of constraints surrounding one's goals, which may ultimately lead to uncertainty of the future. So one of the things that this talks about is, in essence, uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about where I'm going, what my goals are, that ultimately leads to me being dissatisfied with my life circumstances. And so that is kind of an impetus for bringing me to change. So lots of commentary in the literature review of this article that kind of talks about hope and how hope is important for clients and all of those kinds of things. Now, very little is done or talked about or investigated about the therapist's hope in their clients. So therapists' hope may have a central role in the way that treatment is implemented. So if I, as a clinician, feel hopeful for my client, that's going to impact the way that I deliver the therapy that I do. That's going to impact how useful I think therapy will be for my clients. So they go on to talk about how therapists' hopes in their clients may be influenced by a number of elements, such as client factors, their readiness to change, their resources, the symptom severity, therapy process factors, such as remoralization and the therapeutic outcome. So think about what this means. They say therapists' hope in their clients may influence client factors. It may influence if my clients are ready to change. It may influence how severe their symptoms are, how severe they perceive their symptoms to be. So what they're postulating here is that my hope could impact my client and their therapeutic outcomes, if they get better or not. And then this bolded part here, it says therapists' sense of hope in their clients may empower their clients to access their internal and external resources to promote change. In essence, what they're saying is hope is not just a mechanism of change on the part of the client, but if the therapist has hope for their clients, that is an impetus for them to access the resources that they have. This is what's going to lead to change. So they're adding a layer of complexity here around hope, that therapist hope can really have an impact on what happens in therapy and therefore the outcomes of therapy. And then they quote Hannah from 2002, who raises the notion that hope can be viewed as a contagion or a positive influence on client change. So if I have hope, my client might catch that hope, right? Like a germ, we pass it from one person to another. In this case, they're saying hope might be that thing that gets passed from the therapist to the clinician, leading then to positive therapeutic outcomes. So this is something that we don't usually think about, is what role does our hope as therapists have on the outcome that our clients experience in therapy? So they looked at 4 specific hypotheses in this study with this premise of we're going to look at the client hope and therapist hope. The first hypothesis is that client's level of hope would increase from pre-therapy to after the first session. So something will happen during the first session and their hope will go up. And from after the first session to the end of therapy, when they terminate from therapy. So in essence, the hypothesis is hope will steadily grow from pre-therapy to the end of therapy. In addition, they hypothesize that therapists' hope for their clients will also increase from the first to the last session. So they kind of say client hope and therapist hope will steadily increase throughout the course of treatment. The second hypothesis is that clients' pre-therapy hope would be related to first session symptom change. In essence, because clients have hope, they're likely to change even in the first session. That's the hypothesis. And if you look at number 3, it's somewhat similar, is that clients' hope and therapists' hope in their clients after the first session would be positively related to therapy outcomes. So they'll say clients' hope, if they have a high level of hope, they're more likely to have positive outcomes. If therapists have a high level of hope for their clients, they're more likely to have positive outcomes. And the final hypothesis is clients' hope and therapists' hope in their clients after the last session would be positively related to therapy outcomes. So in essence, what they're saying in all of these hypotheses is hope will increase throughout the course of treatment. And when people have high levels of hope, whether it's the client or the therapist, whether it's at the beginning of therapy or the end of therapy, if high levels of hope are present, outcomes will be better, right? And that seems to make a bit of sense, that when hope is present, therapy will be effective. So they kind of say, we're going to look at hope at lots of different stages and among different people, and we're going to see, does hope actually make a difference to therapy outcomes? So in the sample, we kind of break it up into 2 different components, the client sample and the therapist sample. They did this study with 43 clients. 31 of the 43 were clinically depressed or clinically distressed, according to the outcome questionnaire 45, which is a quality of life measure. 60% of the people had 3 sessions, 18.6% had 4 or 5 sessions, and 21% had 6 sessions. So all of these people got between 3 and 6 sessions of therapy. 88%, almost 89% of the clients were voluntarily seeking therapy, whereas 9.1 were involuntarily in therapy. They were mandated to be there. So then if we switch over to the therapist side, there were 10 different therapists that were involved in this study. 8 of them were licensed professional counselors. 2 of them were psychologists. 9 had master's degree, and 1 of them had a master's degree and a doctoral degree. And so you can kind of see the sample is not a really large sample, so we need to think about that as we interpret the results. But you can see between 3 and 6 sessions, what role does hope play for these people? So then what happened? The clients completed 2 measures. They completed the state hope scale, which we've talked about before, and they completed the OQ45 at the beginning and the end of each session. In addition, this is how they measured therapists' hope for their clients. The therapists also completed the state hope scale for each client at the beginning of each session. The design for this study is one group pre-test, post-test, right? So they didn't divide it. There wasn't a control group, which again is the limitation of this study, but they just looked at this one group and said, when hope is present, does it make a difference? And they measured pre and post. Right? So that's kind of the outline of how the study was comprised. So then here are the results, and the results are really kind of interesting. I think this is kind of what you've been waiting for. So that first hypothesis, does hope change over the course of therapy? Does client hope improve? Does therapist hope improve? The clients reported that hope increased after one session of therapy, and you can see that that was a statistically significant change. So yes, hope changed from pre-therapy to the first session. And the level of hope stayed relatively stable from the first to the last session. So it didn't really change much. So there was kind of an initial peak, and then it just steadied out. So that says something about hope. If we can do something to engender hope right at the beginning of therapy, that level of hope will be sustained across the course of therapy. If you look at therapists' hope, their hope in their clients also increased from the first to the last session. So this one, the hypothesis was in fact validated, that therapists had kind of an increased level of hope over the course of therapy. And again, this was a statistically significant difference at the 0.001 level, which means it's very unlikely that you get this by chance. So clients kind of had this peak of hope and then steadied, and therapists kind of increased in hope across the course of treatment. So then you look at the second, in essence, what I guess we should say is, so therefore hope was present in these therapy sessions. So was pre-therapy hope related to first session symptom change? In essence, did things get better as a result of this change in hope? Clients' initial level of hope was not statistically associated with initial gains in therapy. So it didn't actually matter how much hope the client had. They could come in and say, I'm actually not that hopeful. And that didn't necessarily impact if change occurred. But if you look then at that bolded part, therapists' hope in their clients after the first session was significantly related to first session symptom change. So if I have hope that my client will change, it's a better predictor that they will change than if they have hope that they will change. So that has significant implications. The way I view my client, the way I view how likely they are to change, the way that I communicate to them based on my level of hope, that is a significant impact factor on whether change will actually happen. This is a huge takeaway. The client's level of hope didn't predict change. The therapist's level of hope in the clients did predict change. So that's something significant that we should hold on to. Now, keep listening because it even gets better than that. Did clients' hope and therapists' hope in the client after the sessions predict therapy outcomes? Now, this is where they did a hierarchical linear modeling. And overall, you can see that these results were significant. What this means is that the result of the full model, so the predictive model, the examination of the predictor variables revealed that therapists' first session report of hope in their clients was a significant predictor of therapy outcomes after controlling for all the other variables. So the therapist's level of hope during the first session impacted therapy outcomes. It changed whether people had positive outcomes or negative outcomes. However, clients' reports of hope were not related to therapy outcomes in this model at all. Therapists' level of hope predicted outcomes. Clients' level of hope did not. So it doesn't matter if clients come in with a high level of hope or a low level of hope. That doesn't necessarily predict, will therapy be useful? But the therapist's level of hope does make a difference. And then you read that last part. Therapists' last session report of hope for their clients was a significant predictor of therapy outcomes. Clients' reports of hopes were not related to therapy outcomes. So if I have a high level of hope in my clients at the beginning, if I have a high level of hope for my clients at the end, that's actually one of the major indicators of success in therapy. It doesn't, even if the clients get to the end of treatment and they don't report high levels of hope, that's less predictive of therapy outcomes than is therapist hope. So there's a significant thing that we regularly say when we talk about solution-focused brief therapy. People don't know if the session was useful or if it was going to impact change during the session. So sometimes solution-focused therapists will get to the end of the session and they'll say, what did you find useful today? Or was our conversation helpful to you? Right? That's not actually useful because the client's level of hope, the client's level of awareness of usefulness of the session doesn't directly impact the therapy outcomes. It's if I feel like there is hope for them, if I can see that we've done some useful work, that actually has an impact on therapy outcomes. So that's a really, really unusual finding, but a really important finding and consistent with the way that we tend to talk about solution-focused brief therapy. So the discussion, what does all of this mean? Here's kind of their closing argument. Clients, regardless of their level of hope, are able to benefit from therapy. So listen to that. Clients, whether they're hopeful or hopeless, are able to benefit from therapy. That is, clients with lower levels of hope were able to benefit from therapy similarly to those with higher levels. As such, therapists should not feel discouraged with clients who express lower levels of hope. That is such a huge takeaway. Therapists should not feel discouraged with clients who express lower levels of hope. That is huge. We should not let their perception of what's going on for them, the severity of their problems, we shouldn't let that influence our belief that therapy can be helpful. Instead, we should be as hopeful as possible, trusting that they will catch some of that hope and that will lead to positive outcomes for therapy. So this is a huge, important thing that we need to take into consideration. Now, here is the official reference for the article, but this is something that I think is just really, really valuable. That if we can maintain our hope, if we can look at our clients as people who are capable of change, if, like Elliot says a lot of times, if we believe in our clients rather than believing our clients, there is evidence to show that that can change the outcomes of therapy. So the takeaway here is do not lose hope. View our clients as capable. It doesn't matter what their problem is. It doesn't matter how difficult their life is. It doesn't matter what life is throwing at them. What does matter is this an environment where hope can grow? So go out there, do your very, very best for these clients. Believe in them, believe in their capabilities, because that can make all the difference in the outcomes of therapy.